real-time streaming of big data. Warm welcome, Smita. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Anika, for the warm welcome.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure and an honor to be at this series presenting to such an awesome crowd here. Right now I'm feeling the energy as I would feel on the stage with seeing so many participants there and a wonderful program which VMware has organized for us. So thank you, Anita, Pavitra, and the team for organizing this session.
It's a pleasure, Smita. Thank you. Over to you. You can start the session. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have, as Anita mentioned, I have 14 plus years of experience, and I have worked on large-scale distributed systems and as well as handled large-scale data sets at Microsoft, Facebook, and now at Google. So here are a few words that describe me. I recently moved to India. One second. I'm just trying to go to the next slide. Okay. I think you can see this. So yeah, I recently relocated to India after spending many years in US, and I have been thoroughly enjoying my technical journey here, and as well as enjoying the innovation that happens in India, especially in the Bangalore city. With that, let's get into the topic on what is dark data and how can we simplify and understand this concept. So dark data has two properties, like in the simplistic word. First, it is stored. Secondly, it is not used. It is not used in any manner to derive insights or for decision making. One of the numbers quoted by IBM in research in 2018 was 80% of all data is dark data. And this is expected to increase to 93% by 2020. It is this data is not increasing as fast. And that's why it is expected to grow to 93%. Right? But nobody hardly looks at most of it. It just goes into the storage, and once in a while, if there is a legal case or something, then we will fetch that data. The second type which comes to my mind is centers that are there for companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google. They run these huge data centers, and everything that gets done in these data centers, every bit of traffic gets passed to the routers. Now, these routers are very rich data source in our industry, because they not only store where the data is coming from, where the data is going, what is the type of data, how many bytes are there, whether it's an error, whether it's success. It's a very rich set of data. And all of that data is actually stored, but not used as much. And the third example I have is the customer calls that we make. So we query something, we get our answers, we keep the phone down. That data is also stored, but not used as much. Right? So these are the couple of examples we'd say. So now the question is like, hey, why do we even store this data? Right? And there are two answers to it. The first one is that it is required for the compliance reason, for the legal reasons. We have a contract somewhere which says that this data will be saved in case it is used. Secondly, there are the reason we store, if it is not the compliance issue, it is stored based on that there are some deep insights, some industry trends, some patent level stuff, some industry breaking things that is available in this data that we have not been able to fetch it, but with the hope that we will fetch it in the future. Right? Now, the other part which comes is like the storage of data also, and the risk and costs that we pay in storing this data. I already talked about the legal and the regulatory risk. There is a risk when we store this data, right? We first need to figure out, are we allowed to store this data? Do we have the consent of the owner of this data? Have we signed the right level of contract with the owner of the data, whether it is stored or not? So, for example, let me take an example of there's a router information. You are storing your data in Amazon storage. You are using Amazon routers, Amazon hardwares. Amazon is storing the data of when you are accessing the data, when you are not accessing the data. Now, all of this information is owned by you as an owner, and you have given the consent to another company on this how to store your data. So it is and if the company fails to honor that thing, then it is a risk for that company. The second one is the intelligence risk, and intelligence risk comes from there's some rich patterns and patterns which are stored in this data, and if the company is not able to harness it at the right time, some other company can also use that data and get the patents. There's a lot of intelligence stored in there. Let's talk about the storage cost of it. While the storage is a cheap option that we might think that storage is getting cheaper and that's why we are able to store so much data, there's also a cost associated with the storage. And the storage cost, let me give you an idea, quoting this number again from a study which was done, that in Europe by 2020, $891 billion will be spent in storing and maintaining the dark data, which is not being used. 90% of the energy that goes into running the data centers actually goes into maintaining these dark data. So it is a huge cost to our economy. It is a huge cost to our environment when we store this dark data. And it's not only we store it and we keep it aside, it's also we need the right level of tools, the right level of expertise in order to do an ongoing assessment of whether this is right or wrong. Let me quickly do a time check. Okay. So with that, the next part are the technical challenges which are there in this data. Because when this huge stream of data comes in and it has all your privacy data, it has all your personal details, you want it to be encrypted. And the encryption algorithm is a computer science field by itself, and it continues to evolve because of the incoming different types of requirements that keep on coming with the amount of data that we have generated. There's DES algorithms. Now there are another set of triple DES, which is the new encryption algorithm that is coming out. One has to consider whether to use symmetric algorithm, asymmetric algorithm, whether the encryption should be done on the client side or on the server side, whether the decryption cost should be, how much decryption cost can be paid, whether this is decrypted very often or less. So there is all these questions that go into picture. The other thing which I said is the owner decides whether to retain this data or whether to, and when to dispose this data. And the automatic tools have to kick in. The workflows have to kick in applying those policies in. And that itself is a challenge. The other is auditing dark data for security purpose. It could be sometimes like finding a needle in the haystack. So again, you need a lot of work and to identify those right data sets. Now, the technical challenges and innovation are the two sides of the same coin. When there are challenges, we innovate to overcome those challenges. And what is the level of innovation that we are seeing in the industry today, and where we continue to thrive? I think the first one, I'll put it as like unstructured data. The unstructured data, sorry. Yeah. So the first one is, how do we handle this? Most of this data is unstructured, like the logs, it is in the speech, the customer service logs, the videos, it is in the video. Do we structure it or do we not structure it? How do we derive the insights of those? That is one. Secondly is the processing power, right? The faster we can process the data, the faster we can derive the insights from it, the faster we can handle the incoming stream. And that's where the latest work which Google also released in quantum computing last year also plays a very big role in ability to process the large amount of data. And then advances in machine learning. I think this is the field which in the last decade we have seen so many applications of it and so many new forms where it has come into picture. I want to stress on this real-time part of it, because if we are able to process this data incoming as it is coming, then we are able to cope up with it. In some cases, we have to bring the data to rest and then we process it. But in many times, I always want to focus on how can I process it much faster as soon as the data comes into the picture. So these are a couple of innovation ideas that continues to go. And if I look at future applications of dark data, I think three examples come to my mind. One is health. And I think this is a place where still a lot of work is done on paper and pencil. And the documents are scanned and kept in the storage. And also there's a lot of privacy issues with this data. But we have not harnessed a lot of information. I have my records for the last 5 or 10 years. I should be, and there is 7.2 billion people in this world, I should be able to find the patterns that, given my health history for the last decade, how does my health history of the next decade look like? This kind of information is still being worked on. The second is the enterprise productivity. This is something close to my heart. So I actually work on some problems like this, that how do we make the information workers more productive? How do we make it easier for them? You must have seen examples of Gmail Smart Compose feature that came out to help in the productivity of people. And this is about understanding on how grammar and sentences work by processing a lot of text of enterprise data and models across English language or any other language that are generated. The other is the photography and videos. This is also, we continue to innovate. We all are taking more photos and more videos now than ever before. And we will continue to do that. But how can we fast use that data in the right way? If I'm taking thousands of photos, I know that Facebook comes up with like a year-end video where it processes all your pictures and try to come up with some insightful video that you can have for the year-end. Even Google Photos have the same thing. Apple Photos also provides that functionality. But how that video or a photograph can be mapped to a geographical location and where it can be used, those are all the important pieces of information that can come together. So this, I think, gives a good set of examples. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg, what I could share in these 15 minutes, but I hope it creates enough curiosity in all of you to go and learn more about this field. So with this, let me see if we are ready to take questions.
Hi, Smita. Thank you for the wonderful session. And to audience out there, we see 156 participants on this session. We're really happy to have you all here, team. Please feel free. Now, we are going to test whether you attended Smita's session very actively or not. With two quick questions, we will quickly post the questions in the Q&A box of the session. And whoever responds fast gets the prize, and the prize winners will be announced in the end of session today. So here you go. Is what percentage energy of data center is consumed by dark data? I repeat, what percentage energy of data centers is consumed? Oh, the answers are pouring. Okay.
I got
Guys,
the
don't
first one.
urge. Yeah, think
Yeah,
through
Jaya.
what
Yeah.
Smita went through. Yeah, think through what Smita shared in her deck and our conversation. And please, we are still
People are
tapping
taking.
time. We are still tapping time. More to go. 155 participants, and I'm still seeing only few of you have responded. Wow, we have. Okay, thank you. Now we go to the next question. Please share the risk associated with dark data. Second question for the audience. Please share the risk associated with dark data, which Smita went through for us.
Yeah.
Very
Many
nice, very
people,
nice.
many people got
Yeah,
that right.
yeah,
Yeah, I think for the first one, I think it's, can I share, Anita?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The,
Smita, good.
yeah.
But yeah,
For
please
the
go
first
ahead.
one, I think the numbers which are quoted on Wikipedia is that it is 90% of the energy which is used in the data center. The 80% number which I quoted was from 2018 studies from IBM, that 80% of our data is dark data. But
Good.
actually, 90% of the energy which is used goes in managing the dark.
Perfect. I think only one answered us on that. That's good. Okay, thank you, Smita. And we will move on for because more interesting participants and there are lots of questions pouring in. We'll start on Q&A. We'll try to share your questions with Smita and get them answered. Please feel free to punch in your questions in the chat box, please. Time up, guys, on quiz. Let's start with the questions for Smita. Okay, there comes from Kajal, Smita. Is there any governance policy around handling dark data, or is it as simple as normal data? First question from Kajal.
No, there are a lot of government and compliance policies around our data. Many countries also have that the data generated in my country cannot leave my country, right? Some people have some countries would even have the rules of like if the data has to be encrypted even when it is on the wire, when it is being transferred from one place to another. Some people will have the condition of like it should be encrypted only at the storage. So I would say it is different for different areas. Uh, there is also government data which has its own even a higher bar of how it is stored and how it is used.
Okay, thank you. The next question from Supriya. What are some examples in how Google uses dark data? From Supriya.
Yeah, so Google, so first of all, dark data is not used, right? That's why it is dark. But
Yeah.
yes, Google has made a lot of advances, and it's a pleasure and honor to be a part of that company where we are able to do large data processing, large set of data processing. Our data centers are one of the most efficient data centers all around, and And even in the productivity tools, when it is used, we are using a lot of data in order to generate insights for you.
Okay. Hope that answers your question, Supriya. And next question, Smita. What are the resources one should consider in order to know more about dark data from Nayonika?
So I think it's,
What are the
yeah, I would say, I mean, on the net, if you search on dark data papers, I have found IBM has published a very good set of papers which are there. That's one. If you look at just the data processing, there are lots of ways to process the data. Like Google Cloud Platform has a big query on how fast it can process and what are the algorithms that goes in processing the data. So I would say there are a couple of areas. One is you collect the data. Secondly, you process the data. And thirdly, you generate insights out of the data. So depending on what area you are on, I would say maybe pick an area and then go into all three of them.
Okay. So for freshers, one interesting question from Nidhi. What are your tips for making a career in and around the data scientist or data engineer roles?
Yeah, I
What is
think
your tip for making?
I think you will not be able to avoid it. If you are joining the industry, you will come across data and data science. Always remember that data science is not just about algorithms or applying some cool algorithms in the end. A lot of that goes into building the right software for processing the data and handling that data. So, working on
Okay,
those systems is something
great.
that you will come across.
Okay, great. Next question, Smita. What made you pick this stream and how did you get more details on the same from Shubha?
Yeah, so I have been working with data for a very long time in my career. I started it with Microsoft, where I was looking at that time the cloud was just coming up, and we were looking at data patterns on how to provide a reliable service. So there was for me, it was not about learning data science. For me, it was about solving a business problem that got me involved. And after that, I continued working on one business problem after the other in the field of data. But for me, it was
Okay.
the first bit of business problem that got me excited.
Okay. Another interesting question from Anjani. Big data and dark data, is it somehow related?
Yeah, I mean it is. It is it is quite related because dark data is also big data. But big data essentially may not be dark data because of quite a bit of big data is used, and that's where we put analytics on top of it. So it is the fraction of the data space in big data which we call it as which is analyzed more, and that's why.
So there is a question from Aparna. How do we reduce the data which is not useful and consuming too much of energy? Is there a
The
way to
first
identify and
First
uh,
is to identify that, right? I mean, that is the biggest task of it. And in order to identify itself is a task by itself, right? So
correct?
that's where I said that you need more and more processing power even to identify it. Sometimes the companies take the approach of like, it's easy to just store because storage is cheap. You just store it and we get to the analyzing part later.
Okay. So from Pranuti, would unstructured data from social media like text or images, which are available for scrapping, also fall under dark data? And would they also need to come under the compliance or legal rules?
Yes, the social data is a lot under the compliance, and one is supposed to follow very strict rules when they are. You must have seen the Congress hearing, which happened just last week or 2 weeks back with Amazon CEO, Facebook CEO, Google CEO, and Apple CEO, and they talked about how are they using the users' data. So it's not something that you should take it lightly. It is a very serious matter when you handle the data.
Okay, thank you. So the questions are overwhelming, Smita.
Okay,
Okay, I go with the last one. Why do we get accuracy of less than 50% most of the time when we apply machine learning algorithms on them? How to identify data which are useful to us?
Yes.
from
So
other
it's all about first creating the right models, and once you create the models, you need to continue evolving those models in machine learning, right? And what you have to first make sure the data that you are using to create the first set of models. First, the data is accurate. Second, the data is complete. Third, the data is clean, right? It's not you can't create a model with whatever data you have. You need to make sure that it is complete. You are not, if there are billion events, you can't miss 5 events and say your data is complete. Completeness of your data means it is complete to create a model. Accuracy has to be there, that no events have been dropped in between. So these are some of the important things that you consider to create the right models, and then you have to continue evolving it. So it is a hard problem.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So I have a basic question for you before we wrap up on the Q&A session. So in general, we tend to purge lots of historical data, like log files or server files or database tables also for performance of the system. We normally do that. So what is your perspective on balancing data management and dark data utilization around
So
this?
there's some data I feel that you can purge it under the compliance rules if it follows. And I feel it's better if you create some kind of insights out of it and then store that summarized insights or summarized numbers, and then the data gets purged, so that even a year from now, if you want to come back and look at your industry patterns, you already have some summary of data to go back. So I want to follow the approach of like summarize them, create the insights, and if the compliance allows, then purge.
Great. Thank you, Smita. So audience out there, the winners of today's quiz will be announced in the main stage by end of today conference. And to Smita, we'll wrap up with a closure note for on the session. Smita, thank you. You really shared us a fascinating and enlightening journey into the world of data we don't see. What is dark data, how to store the dark data, and risk and cost involved in storing this dark data, and also the technical challenges we come across, the innovation, the main topic of today's session, how to innovate with dark data. You shared some few good thoughts around recent advances with ML, how we can innovate with those data. And we go with a code, every data is not bad data. Can we agree on that, participants? Can we say every data is not bad data? Yeah. Okay. So I wrap up with, I just want to quote one thing about Smita, which I recently read in one of the forum, a motivation talk by her to all the women out there in technologies. And it was really impressive. She says, own yourself for women to motivate ourselves. Suggest brand yourself first. So what you want to be, right? So whether you want to be a tech expert, or you want to be a hard worker, or you want to be a leader in the industry, how you want to perceive yourself. So focus on that as one of the key motivation she suggests to us. And I hope it was a real useful tip to women out there from colleges. We have participants from everywhere, even college students as well as from other tech industries. Hope it helps you too. And Smita, over to you before we wrap up. Thank you very much
Yes.
for your session. Yeah.
It was a pleasure seeing so much involvement and engagement from the crowd. So thanks
Yes.
for having me here, and thanks again to VMware.
Yeah. Thank you, Smita. We end up here. Team, let's go to the main reception and see. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Smita.